Welcome to This Explainer. Look, we're going to jump right in today because we are completely shifting your paradigm on weight loss. For decades, we've basically been spoon-fed the exact same tired advice. But today, we're tossing that out. We're going to look at the true biological systems that actually govern our bodies. We are exploring a completely new model of obesity, the hormonal theory. For over a half-century, the absolute golden rule of weight loss has been this simple, neat little mathematical formula. Calories in, calories out, right? We've all heard it. But let me ask you a question. If weight management is truly just about balancing a caloric equation, why has almost everyone who has ever tried to lose weight by restricting calories ultimately failed? I mean, we've all been there, miserably staring at a tiny, sad portion of dry chicken breast. And what happens? We blame ourselves. We think, oh, I just lack willpower. But if a medical treatment fails nearly 100% of the time, well, maybe the problem isn't the patient. Maybe the problem is the model itself. So if obesity isn't just a caloric imbalance, what is it? The reality is that obesity is actually a hormonal disorder of fat accumulation. Your body is incredibly smart, and it actually features a built-in fat thermostat, which is known as your body set weight. Think about it for a second. You don't consciously tell your heart to beat, and you certainly don't remind your lungs to breathe. Those are automatic homeostatic systems. Well, your body fat is regulated in the exact same way. It automatically defends a specific body weight, vigorously fighting against both increases and decreases, just to keep you at that set point. Now, if your fat thermostat gets hormonally set too high, your body is going to do absolutely everything in its power to make you gain weight to reach that new set point. It does this by pulling two really powerful levers. First, it actively slows down your total energy expenditure, so your metabolism. And second, it massively increases your hunger hormones. This brilliantly explains why when you go on one of those crazy calorie-restricted diets, you eventually just feel cold, tired, and completely ravenous. Eating more doesn't make us fat. Getting fat makes us eat more. Overeating is not some personal choice. It's a hormonally driven behavior. So what biological mechanism is actually turning up this dial in the first place?
That brings us to Section 1, the primary dial, insulin.
The main hormone that turns up your fat thermostat is insulin. Dr. Jason Fung, who is a massive expert on this topic, boldly points this out with a pretty startling medical truth. He says, actually, I can make anybody fat. How? By prescribing insulin. He notes that it literally won't matter how much willpower you have or how many hours you spend running on a treadmill. If a doctor prescribes you insulin, you are going to gain weight. Period. This completely shatters the myth that obesity is just a willpower issue. It's not. It's a hormonal issue.
To really get why insulin makes us gain weight, you gotta understand its actual job. Simply put, insulin is fundamentally a storage hormone. When we eat, insulin is released to move glucose out of the blood and into our cells for energy, and any excess glucose is stored. Think of it this way. Your body has two storage options. The first is glycogen, which is kind of like your wallet. It's super easy to access, but there's a really limited amount of space. Once your wallet is full, insulin directs the rest of that energy into fat, which is like your bank account. It's a lot harder to access, but it has completely unlimited storage space. So when insulin levels are high, we're depositing into the bank. We are storing fat. And when insulin levels are low, we burn fat.
When you compare lean and obese individuals over a few hours, the contrast is just incredibly stark. In obese patients, insulin levels don't just spike way higher after a meal, but they stay stubbornly elevated for much, much longer compared to lean individuals. Their bodies are essentially locked in this constant, unyielding state of fat storage, rarely ever getting the hormonal signal to withdraw energy from that bank account.
Moving right along to Section 2, the glitch, insulin resistance.
But why on earth do our insulin levels stay so high all the time, trapping the body in a permanent state of fat storage? Well, the answer is insulin resistance. It's basically a physiological glitch. We can understand this glitch by looking at how hormones communicate with our cells. Hormones work exactly like a key fitting into a lock. Insulin is the key that unlocks the cell door to let glucose inside for energy. But when your body is just constantly bombarded with high levels of insulin over long periods of time, those cellular locks actually get jammed. The keys just don't fit perfectly anymore, and that metabolic glitch is what we call insulin resistance. So what happens? When the cells resist the insulin, glucose piles up in the blood. Starved for energy inside the cell, the body basically panics. To force that glucose into the resistant cells, your pancreas just produces even more keys, even more insulin. This creates a really terrifying four-step vicious cycle. High insulin levels lead to resistant receptors, which forces the pancreas to produce more insulin, which ultimately commands the body to store even more fat.
Now, if this sounds super familiar, it's because it is exactly the same mechanism as building up a tolerance to a drug, like alcohol or caffeine, right? If you drink 3 cups of coffee every single day, eventually you're going to need 4 cups to get the same buzz. The persistent exposure to insulin leads to resistance, which ironically forces the body to pump out even more of the exact same hormone. High insulin creates insulin resistance, which creates even higher insulin. It's a totally self-defeating loop that just continuously ratchets up your body's fat thermostat.
And this vicious cycle perfectly explains the time-dependent nature of obesity. Science journalist Gary Taubes sums this up so beautifully, saying, "We do not get fat because we overeat. We overeat because we get fat." Obesity operates a whole lot like rust. It takes time. The longer you are stuck in this insulin resistance loop, the higher your body's set weight climbs. After years and years of this, your elevated insulin levels become almost entirely independent of what you eat today. The fat get fatter, driven by a hormonal loop, not some sudden magical loss of willpower.
Which brings us to Section 3, the secondary dial, cortisol.
Insulin isn't the only culprit here. We absolutely have to talk about the massive impact of the secondary dial on our thermostat, cortisol, which is widely known as the stress hormone. To get it, we have to look back at our evolution for a second. In Paleolithic times, stress was almost always a physical threat, like a predator chasing you. Your body dumped cortisol, which immediately dumped glucose into your blood to give your muscles the quick energy to either run or fight. It was short-term stress, and you burned off the glucose immediately. But today, our modern stress is psychological. It's deadlines at work, financial worries, sleep deprivation. This chronic stress triggers that exact same glucose dump, but as you're just sitting at your desk, there is absolutely nowhere for that physical energy to go. So here's the crucial point. Because this chronic, modern psychological stress keeps your blood glucose constantly elevated with zero physical exertion to burn it off, it literally forces your insulin levels to rise to deal with all that extra sugar. And boom, that pulls you right back into that vicious cycle we just talked about. High insulin, leading to insulin resistance, leading to stubborn weight gain. Chronic stress literally makes us store fat, and it doesn't contain a single calorie.
And just like we saw with insulin, we know for a fact this is a direct causal biological relationship. Dr. Fung notes this again with another really stark example. He states that he can make anyone fat by prescribing prednisone, which is a synthetic version of the human hormone cortisol. Seriously, anyone who has ever been on prednisone for an illness knows it comes with one universally dreaded side effect: massive, unavoidable weight gain. This just proves the hormonal theory in real time.
All right, stepping back and looking at the whole picture, we can clearly see that obesity is not a moral failing. It's not a simple math problem of calories. It is a physiological system issue driven by persistent high levels of insulin and cortisol. So, naturally, the ultimate question for anyone looking to actually improve their health is, how on earth do we break this biological cycle?
Well, the answer definitely isn't counting calories, and it's for sure not some magical low-fat diet. To fix a hormonal imbalance, you have to use a hormonal solution. We have to actively break the insulin resistance loop by creating recurrent, intentional periods of very low insulin levels. We literally have to give those cellular locks time to repair, to unjam, so that normal baseline levels of insulin can actually work effectively again. And this brilliantly illustrates the final piece of the puzzle. Since eating practically any food is going to raise insulin to some degree, how do we actually get those levels to drop low enough to reset our fat thermostat? The most important question you need to ask yourself next is, what happens to our body's set weight when we simply abstain from eating? How can the ancient practice of intermittent fasting serve as the ultimate biological tool to finally turn down your fat thermostat? I'm going to leave you to think on that. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you've been taught.